we now slide it roughly a bit back from where we actually going to position it, which is about here. Disassemble the shaft lock on the shaft. Our next procedure is to make sure that we thoroughly clean the inner and the shaft, and it's left bone dry. So just some alcohol based cleaner, brake cleaner, anything alcohol based, no oil based products. And we'll just spray in the split all over. Make sure we're bone dry and clean the whole area. Now we'll slide the shaft lock inner to the position where we actually want it to finish. The distance we put here is in the instructions at 20 to 30 millimeters. The critical thing with fitting a shaft lock, and the purpose is to stop the propeller from going back and hitting the rudder, so that if something happens, the shaft lock can go back. It can actually push the skeg bush back into the housing. The taper will lock up in the front of the skeg, and that's what prevents the shaft from coming back further. So it's important, whatever distance you choose here to fit it at, it's not critical, other than don't put it too close, because you do have to get water in here, hence the taper and the angle the water feeds in there anyway. So you can have the shaft lock further up the shaft than the 20 to 30 mil. The critical thing is that that distance that you set here will never ever allow the propeller to go back and make contact with the rudder. That's the main critical positioning of it. So we've got plenty of room between propeller and rudder on this particular vessel. So I'm happy to leave the shaft lock approximately 40 millimeters ahead of the skeg. And the reason for that is we've got probably at least 200 millimeters or more for the propeller to hit the rudder. So it can never ever get back that far. So now that we've got a position set and locked in for that, we now use Tef Gel. It is the only product to use on these shaft locks. Read the instructions and the warnings. Never ever put grease or oil on the shaft lock. You must only use Tef Gel. We've proven the product, and it does work. It prevents galling of the threads. It prevents the tapers from locking up to the point where they won't release with the release tools. It allows the tapers to slide up and lock up properly and tight. If you use oils and greases, we have proven that when it squeezes the oil and grease out, that those lubricants are not good enough to get it to release properly, and you can't get them apart if they are really, really tightened up. With Tef Gel, it works, it clamps, and they release with the release tools very easily. So Tef Gel, very sticky, gooey, messy shit to work with. You don't need lots. You can see it's all stringy and gooey. All it is the slightest smear on the tapered section where the outer sleeve seats and engages on the inner. You need very little of the product. Smear it around. Do not smear it in the split in the inner shaft collar. That's the taper done. We will smear some on the thread. Once again, don't put it in the split, just smear some around the thread. This is not as critical. It's to lubricate the threads when you tension them up, and it prevents galling and pickups of the metals. Okay, now we have our TEF gel in place. We can now assemble our shaft lock. So we slide simply the collar down up onto the shaft lock. You can put the washer on. I do prefer just to put a smear on the face of the nut. Not super critical, but it just aids and allows everything to do up a little tighter and easier. You will note it is a left-hand thread. It's in the instructions. It's stamped on the nut. It is a left-hand thread. Make sure it starts. Should wind up free by hand. If it doesn't wind up free by hand, then obviously you've cross-threaded it. Something's damaged, something's whatever. So should wind up free by hand. Now we're about to tension up the shaft lock and torque it up. So we've just put the shifter across the two opposing flats, rubber block against the hole just so we don't scratch and dent anything. And now in the kit there is the spanner that goes onto a 1/2 inch drive in the spanner, the tool that's supplied in the kit, used for tensioning it up. So it's simply a matter of sliding it over. Sorry. Position the spanner on the nut, and then we can start tensioning it up. Now, because it's a left-hand thread, you need to have a tension wrench that will do left-hand threads. The tension torque on this particular one is in the manual or the instructions. For the 1 1/8" shaft, it's 120 foot-pounds is the torque that we tension it up to. A little awkward under the boat with it. And we're up to tension, 120 foot-pounds. Job done. Just take the spanners off, job's finished. These are the release tools to undo the shaft lock off the shaft. So first of all, you put your shift and spanner back on and the appropriate spanner to undo the nut. Back the nut off approximately 2 millimeters or thereabouts and separate the nut from the collar, and the washer will be loose and rattling around in there. Do not undo the nut right off. Only separate it by about 2 to 3 millimeters. Then you get your disassembly tools. One's got a radius in it, one's got a taper in it. The radius one fits on the nut side, the tapered one fits on the tapered side. We then just get our 3 bolts, put the bolts in, we won't actually release this one as we've just fitted it, so it's only for demonstration how to go about it, putting the release tool on. Do up your bolts. Once you get all the bolts just done up, simply a spanner, tension 3 bolts, little at a time, and you'll find that the outer sleeve will slide back and come loose off the collar. Once you get that to that point, you can take the tool off, wind your nut off, slide the sleeve off, and it'll all be separated in separate items again. Okay, that's pretty much everything explained.